Good morning, everyone, guys. So the situation in the Middle East is going from bad to worse. Now, I think this is just going to go further and further and further because of the proximity of the US elections. Now, before we start, guys, I'm going to give you my predictions, what I think is going to happen over the next couple of days. And I'm going to give you guys some information that you are just not going to find on mainstream media, but I've managed to find some outlets that are reporting on these things. When I'm looking at what's happening on the streets in the United Kingdom right now, I can remember this time last year when we had, huge well, not this time last year, but on the 7th of October 23, there was huge celebrations on the streets in the United Kingdom of, the only way I can put this, and I may be wrong by, putting the people into this bracket, but pro-Palestinian people in the United Kingdom. There were mass cheering in the streets, and people were cheering the attack that the Palestinians had put into Israel. Now, whether you agree with it or not, that is what happened. Now, it's my optics, it's my perspective that we've now got the same people on the streets, and they've all of a sudden changed their tune now, and they are pro-peace, they're pro-ceasefire, they want, they don't want any violence, and they're anti any violence in the Middle East. So it seems to me that they've done a total 180 now. First of all, they were cheering and they were all up for a bit of war. And now it seems that they've changed their mind. They don't want any war anymore. They just want a ceasefire. Guys, what's happening in the Middle East is absolutely, it's devastating. I've been to these towns, these cities that have been absolutely annihilated. And the one I'm thinking of now is when I went into Mosul in, I think maybe 2018. I was with an NGO called, well, I won't mention the name, but it's one of the big NGOs. And we were going out there. We were giving obviously food, water, cash for work, and we were teaching children about mine awareness. Basically, I should probably do a video on it. I've still got a lot of the training material. But one of the things I noticed was the absolute devastation of that town. I think it is. Mosul is a place in northern Iraq that I've been to several times when it had not been destroyed. And when you go to these places in the Middle East that have just been absolutely destroyed by artillery fire, and you think about the people's lives that were there. And I remember seeing a little boy and a girl. I think I've talked about this before. And they were, the toy that they had was just a normal, like I'd say Panda Pop, but it might not be, a small pop bottle. And it had been filled with a green liquid. And that's what they were playing with. And, I just remember thinking, wow, if people around the world could actually see the devastation that happens, we would have a lot more peace in the world. But the reality is we look at things on the TV and we disassociate with them. We don't think they're real because we watch films and we watch movies, and we're desensitized to this sort of stuff because we've watched films, we've watched movies. So when you're watching it on the TV, although you can condemn it, you can say it's disgusting, you can say it's horrific, until you've been there and seen that devastation with your own eyes and seen the the rubbled concrete, and you've seen the children playing in those, in that rubble, and you're thinking, wow, those kids are playing in rubble that was probably, used to be their house or their block of flats or whatever. So, it's absolutely disgusting. But, my perspective on this situation is, this time last year, we had a load of people celebrating the 7th of October attacks. And we did. There's no denying that, in the United Kingdom and other parts of the world. And now we've got people protesting because they want peace. I just don't see the perspective, or, people are changing their minds now more than the French. So we're going to talk about what's happening in the Middle East. And we're going to talk about this thing with the French and with Israel. Remember, it's all part of this divergence that we've been talking about. Europe is going to have to focus in the Middle East. Europe, especially France, they have a huge Muslim community, a huge Arab-speaking community. And if they seem to be overtly supporting Israel, then they're just going to have more protests on the streets, more of that sort of behavior that we've seen happen. Obviously, in the United Kingdom, we're the same. We have a huge Arab-speaking Muslim population that are pro-Palestinian or whatever that means. I mean, we should all be pro-peace and anti-war, but it seems like we're pro this war and anti that war. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so that's kind of the the backdrop for this video. Now, as we're coming up to this, what's the word I'm looking for? Do I say anniversary? Yeah. As we're coming up to the anniversary of the 7th of October attacks, which is tomorrow, what I think is going to happen, I think Israel are, again, I may be wrong, guys, I may be way off the mark, but this is what I think is going to happen. I think Israel are going to attack on the 7th of October. I think the dates for them to do the operational planning fall in place. I think the significance is there. And why wouldn't you do it on that? Why wouldn't you do it on that anniversary? That's a message to the world then to say, look, from the Israelis, and whether you agree with it or not, this is the Israeli perspective. The message to the world would be, look, you guys attacked us on 7th of October. 1 year on, we are now destroying your towns and cities, and we are now putting huge attacks into Iran. So that's the likelihood of what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, I'm going to share an article with you, and it's something, again, it's one of those things I've been warning about for such a long time, about these wars and how they're not going to be fought conventionally. So this is an article from Al Jazeera. Iran warns of an unconventional response in case of new Israeli attack. Indirect message. In fact, you know what, guys? I think we can just leave it there because I don't want to make these videos too long. Yeah. So Iran has told the United States via an intermediary. Remember what we said. Behind the scenes, you always have these in the corridors of power. You will have somebody on the Iranian side who knows somebody from the US side, and those guys will be talking. Whether that's encrypted messages, whether that's whatever, it doesn't really matter. Normally these two people will know each other, they'll have a rapport, they'll trust each other, and they'll tell each other real information. It makes no sense for those two guys when they're operating together. It makes no sense for those two guys to lie, to make things up, to be biased, because once that happens, you lose trust. And that trust works both ways. Iran has told the United States, obviously by an intermediary, that any Israeli attack against Iran would meet an unconventional response. Now, how many times do I talk about this? How many times do I talk about, we're not going to see, the days of people declaring wars and the days of people, saying, okay, in fact, hang on. Okay, Trump, bring your best 10 battalions, and I bring my best 10 battalions, and we have a big fight in middle of ocean or in middle of city. It's not going to happen like that, And when you see, it's really frustrating for me when I see these like retired NATO generals or colonels, they're on the TV and they're talking about how NATO forces would destroy Russia, or, Iran can't stand up to the air power of the United States. That is all true. But the reality is, the Iranians, they know this, so they're not going to fight like that. Half of the Iranian military budget goes to non-conventional warfare. This is not me speculating. This is all open source information. So when Iran says we're going to respond non-conventionally, it's what I've been warning for, for such a long time. So a non-conventional attack, this could encompass sleeper cells. It could encompass sabotage, which is a huge one. People don't understand the significance of coordinated sabotage attacks. There's literally nothing you can do about it. What are you going to do? How do you protect against sabotage attacks? First of all, you don't know where they're going to come. Any country doesn't have the finances or the resources to protect every piece of vital infrastructure. It's just not on the cards, and it brings me back to the again, no, we're not calling it sabotage, we're just calling it vandalism. There was an incident I think it was a couple of months back in the United Kingdom, where a piece of cable, a vital piece of electricity cable had been cut that supplied Manchester Airport. Now, this piece of cable was outside Manchester Airport, just outside Manchester Airport's perimeter. So it didn't have any airport security on it. Now, that piece of cable, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, but that piece of cable had I think it had a small piece taken out of it. Now, the significance of that is if you take a small piece of cable out of, a long cable, you have to, it's a lot more difficult then to reconnect that cable because you have to put another piece in there. So all this takes time. Now, the significance of that was absolutely huge. I would like to know who was coming into Manchester Airport at that time, who was going out of Manchester Airport at that time, what kind of, who had to be diverted to another airport, and that other airport, was there any incidents at those other airports? That's what I want to know. We'll never find this information. Obviously, that sort of information is what, security services do, MI5, GCHQ, that's all the stuff they'll be looking at. But, I would really like to know what happened, because you don't do something like this. You don't just go and sabotage an airport, because once you do it, you're restricted if you can do that again. So like the Israeli pager attack was a precursor to the escalations that we're seeing right now. So that's kind of like one of the main things that you can foresee happening as things move forwards. Also in the Middle East, we've seen the Israelis target French assets in country. Now, you're not going to find this anywhere in the mainstream media. Let me find it. There it is. So I'll just share this with you, and it's kind of, this is certainly a message to the, there we are. This is a message to, in fact, okay, we'll do that. This really is a message to Macron. So where are we? Israel targets French gas stations in Lebanon amid tensions with Macron. So again, while this is nothing that's going to make the mainstream, this is 100% a message from the Israelis to the French. In a dramatic development reflecting escalating tensions in the region, local sources report that Israeli forces have targeted oil facilities belonging to a French company in Lebanon, following what appears to be a diplomatic dispute with France and, with French President Emmanuel Macron. So this was 100% a message to the French. This was saying, listen, France, you may be all safe in France, but we can strike your facilities. We can strike your facilities wherever they are in the world. Now, what I'll say about the French, obviously coming from an Englishman, the French were selling, well, back in let's go from the Second World War. The French and the British had a pact, not to surrender they weren't allowed to surrender unless the other person said so. As soon as German tanks turned up, Nazi tanks turned up in France, the French did what they did best and surrendered. Then the British said, listen, you need to bring your ships over to British ports because we can't let those ships get into German hands. The French wouldn't do that, so Britain had to sink all the French. Then, the fast forward to the there's a lot of incidents, guys. In fact, fast forward to the Falklands War. The French were selling Exocet missiles to the Argentinians, so and then obviously this conflict now, if you guys watched my video yesterday, I said how I think it was France, United Kingdom, France, the US, I think Spain and Italy, although I may not be 100% sure on Spain and Italy. Go check my video out I did out yesterday, guys. I'll link it at the end. But basically, all these guys came up with this, said, we support Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself. And then as soon as, the Israelis are defending themselves, the optics are that the French are backing out of what they said. Guys, when people say that the French are cheese-eating surrender monkeys, there's kind of a bit of truth into that. But anyway, guys, I'm just going to leave that there. Now, the significance of these attacks and the significance of why all this started in the first place in the Middle East, there's not much, people are just saying that, Hamas did this randomly, and there's a lot of talk about all sorts of wild stuff. But for me, the main reason why this attack went into Israel on the 7th of October 23 was because of this trade route that was about to be opened up by the Israelis and United Arab Emirates. So let me just share this real quick with you guys to show you what I mean. So, oh, not that one. Hang on. So back in, I think it was back in December 23. In fact, do you know what? Rather than me speculate, I'll just show this so you can see exactly what it is. So this was it, guys. It was going to be the UAE-Israel land corridor. The UAE-Israel land corridor is a primarily land-based trade route which runs from ports in Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates across Saudi Arabia and Jordan into Israel and Egypt, leading from the Persian Gulf straight to Israel seaports. The corridor was officially established on the 13th of December 2023. So you see, this was only this was like what, 2 months or something, 2 months and a couple of days after the 7th of October attacks. And, you know, of course, these things, you know, they don't just, you know, they didn't just go on the 12th of December and make it official. These things have been in negotiations. There've been talks about this for quite a while. And, you know, and the Palestinians, the people in Gaza, they knew this. More importantly, the Iranians knew this. Now, the significance of this land corridor, let me just show you an infographic of this land corridor. Now, this land corridor, guys, it's not specific to the conflict. I'm just showing it because it's a good infographic. And I'll put all these links in the description. So this is it here, guys, the land corridor. So Israel logistics. So don't worry about I'm just using this as an as the infographic. So here we've got Israel, and then we've got like the Gaza Strip down here. We've got Jordan, we've got Iraq, Syria, and then here, not just off the map, we've got we've got Iran, and then we've got from here, I don't know why they've not got it on, we've got the Persian Gulf. So normally oil would have to go all the way around here in ships, round here and up there. Now, the problem is that is heavily controlled by the Iranians, because what we keep saying, you know, the Iranians can close the Strait of Hormuz whenever they want. They can just click their fingers and close it. The IRGC, they've got ships, they've got naval assets there. The Iranians heavily control the oil that's coming out of this region. And that has to go by seaport. It has to come up through here. It has to go up through the, what we're talking here, go on, the Suez Canal. You know, so that's the way it has to go at the moment. Now, this proposed land corridor would bypass all that and all this, you know, all this infrastructure, all this shipping that would normally go by seaport around the, you know, around this area, around the Houthi controlled area. That would then be mitigated, and they, you know, it just wouldn't happen. It would all go by land over here. Now, if this happened, Iran would lose out massively. And also, if this happened here as well, by de facto, people in Gaza and the Palestinians, now this is just me speculating, those Palestinians would they'd start to get more money, and the Iranians would lose influence in that region, because the Iranians were paying a lot of money to the, you know, into Hamas, into Palestine, into Gaza. And as soon as this land corridor opened, as soon as this new shipping corridor opened, by de facto, because of the proximity. Now, I know what people are saying, you know, these guys wouldn't ever work together, and they wouldn't do this and they wouldn't do that, and there's political situations. Guys, none of that matters, all right? If people are making money, if people can make money, trust me, it will happen. So you would have a situation whereby you would have Gaza, and I know Gaza doesn't have a port. You would have Gaza right next door to a huge industrial shipping lane. Of course, at some point, there would be investment into Gaza. They would build a port. Then they would open up that land corridor, and people would start to ship through Gaza, because it would be, you know, potentially cheaper. They would let things go through, you know, they would have different, export facilities. And then the people in Gaza would become rich, and they would start to earn money. And then when people are starting to earn money, how can the Iranians influence them when they're not giving them money anymore? So that's the situation there. And that's why I personally think that this whole thing started in the first place. You know, Iran said, listen, guys, you guys need to do something, or we're going to stop paying you. And then, you know, it just happened. And I feel that Iran pushed them towards this because of this trade route. But anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to mag to grid. The main news of this, the main jux of this video is that the Iranians are saying that they're going to strike back non-conventionally. I've been saying this a long time. You know, the West doesn't have an answer for this. You know, most Western militaries don't invest enough money into this. You know, non-conventional attacks are very difficult to, you know, very difficult to thwart, because normally they go against civilian infrastructure, your energy system, your ports, your, you know, sabotage. There could be sleeper cells activated. There could be all sorts of stuff happening. And also, we've got this message that the Israelis can strike French assets in Lebanon. So you've got all this stuff now, all of it coming to a crescendo. Like I said, I think we're going to see escalation and escalation. I think there's going to be an Israeli attack on the 7th. I think that's when it's going to go in. It just fits into that window of opportunity whereby the Israelis understand where they're going to strike. They want to do it at a significant time. What better time to strike than the 7th of October, exactly 1 year after the initial invasion. Anyway, guys, I'm going to back to grid, and I'll get you guys another video later.